Hey folks, SC Closer, friends call me Vic. This is another episode of Vic C's Stories and Tall Tales. I'm going to call this one Mishaps. And we'll talk about mishaps. On the ship, anytime there was a, quote, mishap, anybody on your ship, you got involved in anything, it could be shipboard or it could be off the ship. They would put it in the ship's newspaper, would come out once a week, I think, and it would be summary of mishaps. And they would list these things. Well, I made the summary of mishaps. All right, this story starts out, it was a Friday, and we got off a little bit early, and it was in the wintertime. And me and my buddy Mario, we had motorcycles, and we decided that we wanted some homemade apple pie and apple fritters and apple crepes and apple whatever you can think of, okay? And the place to get things like that was Julian, California. If you never heard of Julian, California, it was a small town up in the mountains outside of San Diego. I think it was roughly 80 miles out, something like that, about 80 miles out. It might have been a little bit more. So we hopped on the bikes, and it was wintertime, and contrary to popular belief, it does get cool in Southern California in the wintertime, particularly when we were going up into the mountains. We were going at higher elevations. So we put on ponchos, which were very fashionable in the 80s, and we put on our leather jackets, and then we had our helmets and gloves and all that stuff. And we took off, and we started heading up there to Julian. And so we left early because we got off early that day. So it was daylight, but it started to turn dark as we headed up there. It wasn't quite dark yet, but it was getting dark. And we rode all the way up there with no problems, and we had to go up, down, snaking through these little mountain roads. And we got up to Julian, and we got up there to the little cafe there in town, and we went in there and had a big nice dinner. And like I said, we had all sorts of apple this and apple that, and it was very good. So we come out after dinner, and did I mention there was snow on the ground? Maybe I forgot about that. But yeah, as we were going up there in the mountains, there was snow. Now, it was not on the road, but it was, off on the edges and stuff like that. There was snow up in the higher elevations, so it just gives you an idea that it was pretty cold still. But anyway, we came back out, and we got on the bikes, and we started heading on back down the mountain. Now, we had already rode all the way up the mountain, so now we're going back down the mountain. And we were going along, and it's nighttime. And, the bikes that we had back then, they were made in the early 80s. And, the lights weren't really that great on these bikes. The headlights, you couldn't really see all that well. If you went much over about 40 miles an hour, you really, by the time you saw something, you couldn't really stop, and it's just kind of the way it was. And we were coming down this mountain. We were probably going 50, 55 miles an hour. We weren't going all that fast. And we were leaning, and I had the lead, and my buddy Mario was back behind me, and I was riding the outside line, and he was riding the inside line. And as we were coming around this curve, and I was coming around the curve, leaning around, I saw gravel. And by the time I saw the gravel, I was in the gravel. There was gravel and rocks on the edge of the road, and I got into it. And the bike started to skid. Now the road kept curving. We were going down the mountain, and the road's curving, and I'm skidding. I used to ride dirt bikes when I was a kid, so I'm trying to ride this out. I'm just basically, I got the thing kicked around like this, and I'm just going. Well, the road keeps curving, but I'm not curving anymore. I'm going straight. And there's a cliff there, okay? Fortunately, I did not go off the cliff, but the road curved and was going down, and then it curved back around. And as I'm skidding down like this, I come back into the road and I'm still skidding sideways. So like I said, I just went right along the edge of this cliff. I skid along, get back, I'm back on the road, and as soon as I hit it, the bike high sides and it just flips, because it's sliding, it hits that pavement, it just flips. It throws me off. So I'm like flying out ahead of the bike. I remember having my hands out. This arm goes down underneath me. I'm sliding on my shoulder down the road. My head hits the road what I can remember to be about 4 times. I mean, I can't control it. My head's just smacking the road. I'm gritting my teeth the whole time this is happening, and it seems like it's happening in slow motion. I'm sliding down the road, and the bike's sliding right behind me. Finally, I stop, and I roll over on my back, and I'm looking up at the stars. I hear my buddy circling around. He was horrified. He saw the whole thing, and he came back around. By that point, I was sitting there laying there. I'm like, okay, can I move my legs? And my legs were moving. Can I move my arms? And I'm like, I think I'm okay. About this point, I'm like, I can't breathe. I need to come out of this helmet. I grabbed my helmet, and I don't know how I did it, but I snatched it off. I didn't even undo the chin strap. I had to come out of that helmet. I felt like I could not breathe. By this time, Mario had come up, and he was hollering, man, are you okay? Are you okay? And I said, yeah, I think so. I'm getting up. And he said, man, don't you get up if you're not all right. And I said, I think I'm fine. I got up, and I was okay. And I started spitting out some stuff. It was part of my teeth. I'd been gritting my teeth when my head was hitting the pavement, and I chipped some teeth. And these teeth are chipped to this day, and that reminds me of this incident every day, okay? So I get up, and we're looking around, and Mario's like, man, Vic, I thought you were going off that cliff. And he says, when you came back on the road, I was like, oh boy, he didn't go off the cliff. And he said, and then you got thrown off the bike. And he says, and you're sliding down the road. And he goes, and the bike was sliding behind you. He goes, I thought the bike was going to run over you, and he's like, and he said, I don't know how you got up from this. And I was like, I said, I don't know. And he said, what happened? I said, I hit some gravel on the road, hit some gravel. So in any event, long story short here, the bike, everything on the right side of the bike was gone, okay? Everything was gone. I'll tell another story on how I got it fixed. That's another episode. But we walked back around. I looked at it. I said, there's no way I'm riding this bike. The handlebars were bent across the tank. There was nothing left on the right side of the bike. And by that time, some people that lived off the side of the road up here, they saw this happen. They kind of lived up kind of on a hill, like, and they were higher than the road. And they come running down there, and they were like, man, are you all right? Are you all right? He says, we can't believe you got up from that. We saw the whole thing. I was like, wow, it's like everybody. So they let us leave the motorcycle up there at their house, and I got on the bike with my buddy, and we rode back to San Diego. I'll tell you about picking up the bike and getting it fixed in another episode. So we get back to town. I felt fine. But when we got down to Ramona, California, we stopped at a Pizza Hut. We stopped in there for a minute, and we went in, and I think we got something to drink while we were in there and went to the restroom and all. And by this point, I'm not feeling too good. I think the shock was setting in a little bit from what had happened. I wasn't feeling so hot, but hey, we had to get back, So I got back on the bike with my buddy, and he rode us back to San Diego. And the next morning, I check into medical, and I told them about the accident. They checked me out. I had the chipped teeth. I still have a little scar on my hand. You can't see it so much anymore. It's faded a lot now, but I had a little scar because when I threw my hand out, when I got thrown, my hand right here in my hand hit the road. It wore through my glove. I had a slight little scar. Like I said, it's mostly gone now. It was a long time ago. It was like 1980. I want to say 88. I think it was probably 88. And but it wore a hole in the glove. It ripped the shoulder off my leather jacket. It just ripped it off. The poncho underneath me had kept me from getting hurt any more serious. I had a bruise on my hip, and I had torn my pants leg. And I think this hand was sprained. My right hand was sprained. Other than that, I was fine. Well, after I checked into medical, they checked me out a little bit, and they said, yeah, you seem to be fine and all. Well, at quarters, I think we were all up on the flight deck for quarters that following Monday. This would have been a Saturday that I checked into medical and everything. But that following Monday, we're all up on the flight deck, and the captain's addressing the crew. And that morning, somebody came to me and said, hey, the captain wants to know if you have your helmet. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, the captain wants to borrow your helmet. And I'm like, okay. So I gave it to the guy. And anyhow, so when we got up there that morning, the captain was up there talking about this. And he held the helmet up. And my helmet chunks were knocked out of the side of it. And it was a full face showy helmet. And like I said, chunks were like out of the side of it. And he held the helmet up and said, we had a crew member, one of our shipmates had an accident over the weekend, almost went off a cliff. And he said that he had hit the road reportedly at least 4 times. And he says, and all he had was very minor injuries. He walked away from it, and this is his helmet. And this is why everyone should be wearing your helmet when you're riding a motorcycle. And he didn't say my name, but everybody pretty much knew it was me. So then I came out in the ship's newspaper, and I had made the summary of mishaps. So that's how I had made the summary of mishaps. And it's also why when I wear my little vest in the riding club that I ride with on occasion, I have what they call the broken wings, because I have crashed. And I walked away from it and lived to tell about it. So that's my story about how I made the summary of mishaps.